On behalf of Netaji Subhas Open University, I welcome you all to the very prestigious 10th Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose Memorial Lecture. We are very honored to have with us Professor Rajat Kanta, former Vice-Chancellor, Visva University, and Emeritus Professor of History, the Presidency University. Professor Rajat Kanta is an outstanding historian who truly needs no introduction. His publications are widely acclaimed and have opened new frontiers of history. We feel privileged that Professor Ray shall be delivering the very illuminating 10th Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose Memorial Lecture before us. Now, I shall invoke on stage our Registrar, Dr. Oshit Boronait. Sir, please take it. Now, may I request our Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Professor Ranjan Chakraborty, to kindly felicitate Professor Ray. Now I shall request Dr. Aich to felicitate our Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Professor Ranjan Chakraborty, sir. Thank you, sir. Now may I request the Director, Center for Internal Quality Assurance, Professor Anirban Ghosh, to kindly felicitate Dr. Aich, our Registrar. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now may I request Dr. Aich to kindly deliver the welcome address.
Honorable Vice-Chancellor Professor Ranjan Chakraborty, respected Professor Rajat Kanta, former Vice-Chancellor of Visva University and Emeritus Professor of History, Presidency University, directors of different schools of studies of our university, all my colleagues and students present here, and also the dignitaries coming from different parts of the state. I welcome all of you to this 10th Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose Memorial Lecture organized by the School of Social Sciences. Today is indeed a historic day for this university. This year is also the silver jubilee year of our university. Professor Rajat Kanta, renowned historian of our time, has kindly agreed to deliver the 10th Memorial Lecture on this glorious occasion. I just want to mention that this is the first time that we are organizing the memorial lecture on the 23rd January, the date of birth of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, which we could not actually follow during the last years. During the last years, actually, the memorial lecture and the 23rd January, they didn't match in the past. In the past, these lectures were delivered by luminaries coming from different universities, higher education institutions of the country and also abroad. I would like to mention a few of them. Professor Suranjan Das, Professor Sugato Bose, Professor Bidyut Chakraborty, Professor Sabyasachi Bhattacharya, Professor Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, Professor Sudipto Kaviraj, and so on. There are others. I have mentioned a few of them. Now, before I stop, I just say a few words about the university. This university was founded, as all of you know, in the year 1997 in the hallowed memory of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, which was the birth centenary year of this great leader. We in this premier ODL University of Eastern India which is now declared a Grade A university by NAC. We are very much aware about our responsibilities to our nearly 500,000 learners at present, who are scattered throughout the state of West Bengal, and who, as actually Netaji envisaged, would ultimately contribute to creating a society worth living for all of us. I would again welcome all of you to this memorial lecture. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the welcome address. Now may I request our Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Professor Ranjan Chakraborty, to kindly introduce our distinguished speaker and to chair the session. Sir, please.
Professor Rajat Kanta Rai, today's speaker, Dr. Rashid Poronait, the Registrar of the University, directors of different schools, our officials, our students, faculty members, distinguished guests, my colleagues at other universities and colleges, my friends from the media, and ladies and gentlemen. Today is a very auspicious day. Today is the birthday of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. And I am very happy, I am delighted that the 10th Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose Memorial Lecture will be delivered within a short while from now by one of the finest historians of our times, Professor Rajat Kanta Rai. Previously, this lecture could not be held on Netaji's birthday due to reasons not very convincing to me. I heard that on 23rd January every year there was another program organized by NIAS, and our university in the initial stages was housed in a building which was shared by NIAS. Even today, NIAS has organized its own program, and from now on, I believe NSOU will hold the Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose Memorial Lecture on 23rd January only. This is a new beginning, and I am very happy about it, like all my colleagues. I shall very briefly introduce Professor Rai. And I also express my deep sense of gratitude, sir, for kindly giving your consent to deliver the 10th Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose Memorial Lecture today, despite your ill health. We have printed your lecture, and you will be also happy to know that we have entered into an agreement recently, only last week, with one of the leading publishers of the country, who agreed to publish our books, our monographs, our edited volumes hereafter. And if Professor Rai agrees, then he can further develop today's lecture, and he can develop it into a full-length monograph, if possible. This is my humble request to you, sir. So without wasting further time, I am briefly introducing Professor Rajat Kanta Rai. Professor Rajat Kanta Rai is Professor Emeritus, Department of History, Presidency College. He was the Vice-Chancellor of Visva Bharati University, Shantiniketan. His books include, to mention a few, Social Conflict and Political Unrest in Bengal, 1875-1927, and Exploring Emotional History and the Felt Community. He is now engaged in writing on eros and history in Indian civilization and the psychic history of Rabindranath Tagore. His latest contribution is Civil Society and Politics, Bengal, 1905-1927, in a comprehensive history of modern Bengal, 1700-1950, 3 volumes, edited by Sabyasachi Bhattacharya, published by the Asiatic Society and Primus Books. I would now request Professor Rai to deliver his address. Professor Rajat Kanta Rai.
Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Registrar Dr. I, friends and colleagues and students, I see several among you, and ladies and gentlemen. The first problem today is my voice. Tell me if you can hear me. At the back, I entitled this essay under Eastern Eyes, The World Seer, One World and the Poet. I could as well have named this The World Seer in a Globalizing World, the ecumeny of Rabindranath Tagore. By World Seer, which in Bengali would translate as Vishwa Kobi. World Seer in the Upanishadic sense is Om Bhur Bhuvaha Swaha, or it can mean the earth as circumnavigated by Ferdinand Magellan for the first time. I use it in both senses, the word. Kobi, in the Rig Veda, the meaning of Kobi is prophet, seer. Seer is a better word. And word seer is, I think, an exact equivalent of Vishwakobi. You will see the relevance of this later on. At the moment, it seems to be gratuitous. I am short of breath, and you will forgive me if I take time to deliver this. Globalization is a term which I first came across after the disintegration of the Soviet Union in 1991, followed by the ascendancy of the international capital and the triumph of Western culture. Now, that is the term itself. The process began earlier. So we have the choice of saying that globalization began in 1991, which I don't favor, and globalization began in ... I'm coming to that. Now, what is to be this dot? I have felt that literally globalization means rounding the world, the planet Earth, which is like a globe. And what is globe is global. And how was this proved? It was known long before Columbus voyaged to America with this belief that he would not fall from Earth into the infinite spaces. But it was Ferdinand Magellan's fleet, which in, if I remember right, 1529, 1531, circumnavigated the globe. And globalization, literally therefore, began with that event. There was global time instead of hemispherical time since 1520, 1519, 1521. Now, Rabindranath Tagore had a keen interest in the Inca and Aztec monuments in the Western Hemisphere, and he traveled to Latin America with the hope of seeing these ruins in Mexico and in Peru, but he landed up instead in Argentina in the care of his great beloved, Victoria Ocampo. Now, he, as a youth, had read history with horror. He had read in history of the wiping out of the population of the Americas, the people we call Red Indians. We Bengalis call them Red Indians. Copper-colored Native Americans. He learned with horror that this race disappeared from the Americas and the West Indies and Australasia. There are surviving pockets, but the population is wiped out. It is in history the great Holocaust, far exceeding the Jewish massacre in the gas chambers, far exceeding Black Death in medieval Europe, far exceeding our Bengal famine of 1769-70, because the geographical ethnic map of the world is drastically altered. The colors, copper color disappears, and the emptied lands are occupied by whites and blacks. Leblanc as masters, Lenoir as le damné de la terre. Now, Rabindranath knew all this from his history reading. He did not perhaps see that there was some good coming out of it. The root crop, yam, probably all in Bengali, which is an American root crop, augmented the precarious food supply of Africa. Another American root crop, potato, became the principal diet of Ireland, so much so that a failure of the crop caused the Great Famine, the Great Irish Famine. It was perhaps some compensation for the export of white and black ivory. White ivory is, of course, the elephant teeth, but there is more valuable, more expensive commodity, black men as plantation and mine slaves. There is now a mixture in Brazil which is unprecedented and represented by the great footballer of all times, Pele. Now, one interesting feature of Rabindranath's later analysis of world history is to cast it in terms of two entities, East and West. Rudyard Kipling won the Nobel Prize a few years before Rabindranath did, and Kipling is credited. Why say credited? We know he said the famous line, East is West, East is East, and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. Interestingly, Rabindranath agreed with the first part. East is East and West is West. As regards the twain shall never meet, he contested this. And he said, East and West are twin gems forever in the circlet of mankind. One can see that both poets, while differing, thought in the same categories of the mind, East and West. Nowadays we have South and North. Yesterday we had the first world, the second world, and the third world. The third world, I believe, still in a sense survives and represents partially the East. The East in Rabindranath's time did not include Africa. He wrote only one poem on Africa, and he there did not assign an active role in history to l'Afrique noire. He saw it, Black Africa, south of the Saharas, as a victim, a pure victim of oppression and exploitation. Now, until Kipling's time, and Kipling's time will shortly be replaced by Rabindranath's time. Until Kipling's time, the flow of ideas in the world, Africa is excluded from this. The flow of ideas was one way, from the West to the East. Around 1900, in a very rough sense, we see a change coming on. There begins a two-way traffic in ideas, and two men, world icons, play a key part in this. Both belong to India, both belong to the same generation, and both, as Jawaharlal Nehru put it, were the greatest men on earth. And the flow of ideas did not quite reverse, but it was now no longer Einbahnstraße. How did this begin? 1902 is an interesting date. Now, perhaps Rabindranath had allowed less to Kipling than he deserved. Kipling did say, in the next line to East is East, and never the twain shall meet. He did say that when two strong men meet, these distinctions cease to matter. Ironically, Sudena, there was an illustration of Kipling's dictum. In 1902, Britain, fearing Russia's menace to its Indian empire, struck up an alliance with Japan, the Anglo-Japanese alliance of 1902. And before the ink dried on the treaty. Japan had attacked Russia and sunk the Russian fleet in the Tsushima Straits. Now, I don't know how Kipling interpreted this, the imperialist poet. But we know that the then nationalist poet, I emphasize then, the then nationalist poet Rabindranath Tagore saw it as a triumph of the East over the West. Excuse me, I lose my voice and breath from time to time. You'll have to put up with these pauses. Rabindranath may have read this event differently from Kipling. We don't know. Kipling, would he have been quite happy? Well, the Indian Empire for the moment became secure. This was followed by, 1902 was followed by 1905. The poet joined the nationalist movement and was at the forefront of the Swadeshi movement, and the Bengalis had waxed patriotic over the victory of Japan. And Okakura Kakuzo, who was in Calcutta at the time of the Anglo-Japanese alliance, Okakura Kakuzo was lionized by Bengalis, and Rabindranath befriended Okakura. He was in Calcutta composing his book, The Ideals of the East, with the help of Sister Nivedita. And there, in the Ideals of the East, Okakura preached the unity of the East, and he thought that the East had something to give to the West. This was called Pan-Asianism, and Rabindranath became not merely a nationalist, but also a Pan-Asianist. For the time being, only a little time. 1908 changed all this drastically. There were riots in Bengal following the Swadeshi volunteer enforcement of boycott. Rabindranath withdrew from the movement and wrote to his former student, Aurobindo Mohan Bose, Sir Jagadish Bose's nephew. Yes, that he would never make the mistake again of putting God before, thank you, putting God before nation and man before nation. This was a turnaround. And there was to follow a second turnaround. Japan distorted its Pan-Asian ideal, Okakura's ideal, into the greater East Asia new order, which meant effectively Japanese occupation and domination of Manchuria, Korea, China, and if possible, Southeast Asia. At that point, Rabindranath turn from Pan-Asianism to universal humanism. 1908 is also significant because Mahatma Gandhi published his booklet, Hind Swaraj. Rabindranath had taken the stance that the state should be avoided and the village should build itself up. Mohandas took exactly the same stance. Between the two men, as you would know, there were many, many differences. But there is a deeper underlying unity between the two, without which the friendship and I'd say love between the two would not have been possible. They were more alike than different in their ideas. Now, Rabindranath became increasingly strident, and in 1916 he delivered his diatribe against nationalism. He toured Japan and America, United States, and attacked nationalism head on. By nationalism, he meant the state, whether imperial or national. His point was that instead of the dynast of old, who held loose subjects together lightly, the nation was now in charge of its conquests. And that is the sense in which he interpreted Japanese nationalism as imperialism, or imperialism as nationalism. He told his Jap audience, there is only one history, the history of mankind. And the history of nations are but mere chapters in this history. Jap intellectuals were uneasy, and some said Rabindranath was a poet belonging to a defeated nation. Rabindranath gave his reply to this irony in America. I am trying to find the quote, but give me some time. We the country of no nations of the world. We, the country of no nations of the world, are thankful that we have not violated the law of God and the law of humanity. Now this phrase is interesting. What did he mean? He told his American audience that if we are victims of nationalist encroachments, and British imperialism he saw as nationalism, because the British nation was in charge, unlike the Mughal dynasty. The West had sprung up as a combination of rival nation states, and Japan had joined them. The rest of the world, Asia was a country of no nations of the world. And if the Americans advised that to resist encroachment, turn yourself into a nation and resist, he replied, is this the right advice, true advice? Is this the advice of a man to a man? This was probably the sharpest attack on nationalism in intellectual history so far. Next year, the lectures in America and Japan were published as nationalism. Now, we have here an interesting ideal of man. What is he implying? Now, if we search Indian tradition, there is no equivalent to nationalism or internationalism exactly. There is no word which exactly connotes these two English terms in no Indian language. Rabindranath had in mind a new image of man. What was this image? Let us look back at tradition. If you read Push Parikha by Vidyapati, or if you search Muhnat Nansiri Kiyat, you will see that patriotism or nationalism is not a known idea. I'm talking of the 12th century, 13th century, 14th century, Vidyapati's time, 14th, and I'm talking of the 17th century. Muhta Nainsi wrote his Kiyat, Chronicle, then. The chief ideal there, the chief loyalty which is projected is the subject's loyalty to his chief. And if one talked of one's Desh, Desh probably meant Gaon, one's own rural locality. And in Vidyapati's narrative, we indeed have deceit, treachery, replacing earlier better ideas. Vidyapati, in the test of a man, Push Pariksha, recommended, or through the story implied, that there was a place for deceit instead of bravery in manhood. And there are several stories of the chiefs of Delhi and Kannauj falling victim to the Sultan of Ghor because of the treachery of their queens. Now, Rabindranath's Muktodhara is a play which has a character named Dhananjay Bairagi, and he is the man of all seasons. The man of all seasons is Well, he has two characteristics. Courage in adversity, যদি তোর দর্শনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে, and commitment, loyalty to a cause. অলখ নিরঞ্জন মহারব উঠে বন্ধন টুটে করে ভয় ভঞ্জন. This ideal you will not find in Vidyapati or Muktanayans. And I would add, the character Dhananjay Vairagi is inconceivable without the presence of Mahatmaji and the consciousness of Gurudev. I mean, we just can't have that character without these two factors. These two were world icons, and their differences were mediated by a white missionary, the English missionary C.F. Andrews, who fostered and took into care the relationship between the two in the world's sight. The world was deeply interested in the contest of ideas between Mahatmaji and Gurudev. They did not see the underlying unity. And Dinabandhu, which is what we call Andrews, was in that sense an interpreter, a mediator, a triangle, strange in the extreme. The man in flowing robes, the man in loincloth, and in between them, the white missionary who had dedicated his life and died in India, in Calcutta. Along with this emergence of men, two men as icons, world icons, the loincloth and the flowing robes. Along with the emergence of this new embodiment of manhood, there was a transformation of the idea, the form of woman too. Episodes of love and friendship across cultures were now possible in the new international age since 1870 of rapid communications, easier communications. There was intermixture. And I would just briefly mention three affairs of, what should I say, love. There is no other word for it. Three love affairs which would not have been possible without the proceeding globalization. The first is Rabindranath and Victoria Ocampo. The second is Mahatmaji and Sarala Devi Chaudhurani, Rabindranath's niece. And the third is, today we remember him, Netaji Subhas Bose and Emilie Schenkel. Now you will find the stories briefly narrated in your booklet, so I will not linger over that. The stories are interesting, and I hope you will find it not merely entertaining, but instructive. At least I was instructed. Now, things were happening at this time. The First World War came to an end in 1919. Roland, who got the Nobel Prize, the novelist Roland, Jean-Christophe, got the Nobel Prize immediately after Rabindranath. He came across nationalism and was deeply impressed by it. He was at the time circulating in 1919 he was circulating a declaration of the freedom of the independence of the intellect, of the spirit. And he asked Rabindranath to sign it. The declaration was signed by Roland, Rabindranath, Einstein, Stephen Zweig, and several other intellectuals. It was designed as an intellectual manifesto. The elite of intellectuals of all countries were to join together against oppression and despotism to protect freedom of thought. That was the gist of the declaration. Note, this was an appeal confined to the intellectual elite. Roland's words. Rabindranath was drawn into the movement and became the center of it. Roland recognized this. This was because of two reasons. One, Rabindranath's friends and acquaintances spread across many more countries in all the continents than any signatory of the Déclaration de l'Esprit. Within a few years, 2 or 3 years, it was seen that Rabindranath's appeal to very many countries was not an intellectual appeal. It was a mass appeal. There is no other word for it. There was a frenzy to see Gurudev whenever he appeared in a foreign city. No other intellectual of this period encountered such demonstrations of welcome and affection. Now, besides the mass frenzy to see and touch Rabindranath, there was a spiritual appeal which I distinguish from Roland's intellectual appeal. It was not the intellectual elite alone that Rabindranath captivated. Wherever he went, and particularly in China and the Balkans, 1924 and 1926, he got the affectionate welcome of both the ruler and the ordinary citizens, and was opposed by the radical youth who had followed closely the debate between Mahatmaji and Gurudev and thought, siding with Mahatmaji, they thought that Gurudev's message was gratuitously spiritual and anti-nationalist. Now, there was a misapprehension about this. I've already said that Rabindranath's differences with Mahatmaji lay on the surface. Both men were spiritual men, and Rabindranath used the word spirit in the same sense as Gandhi, not as Roland's l'esprit, which is intellect. I mean, I'm not translating very well, but l'esprit, while literally meaning spirit, in that context meant the mind, the intellect, at least in Roland's definition. Now, there is one aspect to this spiritual appeal which is new and in a sense unique. Unlike the great religious preachers preceding him, once remembers Swami Vivekananda and many others, he, Rabindranath, conducted his message and his debate in terms of science. He was a voracious reader of scientific books, and he cast his ideas of the divine order in scientific terms. He preached the religion of man in the Oxford lectures, and there he appended his debate with Einstein, Albert Einstein, in 1930 about reality. I would not dwell on this debate much, but Einstein, though he was an inventor of the theory of relativity, took the stance that things they existed objectively, independent of the mind. He pointed to the table and he said, even if there was no man to see it, the table would remain. This is the classic Newtonian stand, the Western scientific stand. Mind you, he was a relativist, but he was saying this. Rabindranath replied, yes, but the universal mind will see it. Universal mind. Can you hear me? This is a debate about reality and a debate in scientific terms. The Oxford lectures, Hibbert lectures, presented the debate between Einstein and Rabindranath, and in scientific terms, it advocated not a religion, but a moral creed, spiritual creed for all men. Now, people had done this before him. Way back in antiquity, Akhenaten, the prince of Egypt, Pharaoh, had taught that the sun was the only God and only he is to be worshipped, the first monotheist of the world. It's the universal human God. More liberal in a way than Hazrat Moses' 10 commandments. There the God, the Yahweh, Jehovah, is a frowning God. Akhenaten's God was the sun's smile. Later on, we find in India Ashoka and his Dhamma, which is also a moral creed for all men, not Buddhism. And we have later on Akbar and his Deen-e-Ilahi, which again is for all men. It's not Islam. But what is new in Rabindranath's universal mind is the scientific dimension in debate with no less than Albert Einstein. And he pointed out to Einstein something which Werner Heisenberg was opposing Einstein about. Now, mind you, Einstein was the theorist of relativity, but Heisenberg further demonstrated that the particles' motion was not predictable with certainty. I mean, electrons, neutrons, they circle around each other and they do so apparently in a regular motion. But for a moment, this cannot be tested while the test is being set up. And Rabindranath replied to Einstein's statement that the universal mind was there and not everything was predetermined. Einstein did not like this further relativization. He had become a believer in Yahweh because of Nazi persecution. And he remained silent on this. Rabindranath, what he said was, this table is a combination of particles which are in motion all the time. And that entity was put together in someone's mind. The particles were constitutive of one thing because a mind saw the particles in their right relationship with each other. Now, what about this universal mind? in 1924, 6 years before Einstein's debate with Rabindranath, Rabindranath, the poet, had recounted to the Chinese youth an experience of his which he had in his estate, Shahzadpur, in 1891, a moment of realization or vision. These are two chapters in the religion of man. His friend and secretary, Leonard Elmhurst, took the notes of this lecture. And this was the first time he said anything about his experience of 1891, the Shahzadpur realization. He had kept this secret. Nijjolini Sapnabhango was widely reported, but this closer to his heart, he kept secret till 1924. And he said to the Chinese youth, they were clamoring, what is the proof of your God, of your universal mind? How do you prove his existence? He replied that it could not be penetrated, the mystery could not be penetrated with the intellect, the brain, or with the five senses. Beyond the five senses, there may be, at least mankind has, a gift called intuition. And by intuition, one may fleetingly catch the truth in a whole. Leonard Elmhurst took the notes of this important lecture and listened to Rabindranath keenly and attentively whenever he talked about Asatoma Sadgamaya. Leonard Elmhurst translated this as, help us to distinguish the unreal from the real. Asat and Sat. Unreal and real. In the meanwhile, Rabindranath had set up his university. In a nationalist mood, he had set up the Brahmacharya Ashram in 1902. Or is it 1901? 19. This Bolpur school he developed into Visva Bharati, which he called an international university. And he was helped by 3 lifelong English friends who helped him realize this dream of an international university where Yatra Vishwam Bhavati Ekaniya, where the world finds a single nest. Now Rabindranath's university was based on personal contacts. It was an institution, of course, but it was not institutionalized. The 3 men who helped him were C.F. Andrews, William Winston Pearson, and Leonard Knight Elmhurst. Besides these 3 men, to serve him lifelong. There were other people who collaborated closely, among them Sylvain Lévy of France, Kintaro Kasahara of Japan, Kan Yun-shan of China. These men would not have come to Shantiniketan and stayed there without the attraction and pull of the poet. Shantiniketan was an extremely discomfortable place, infested with snakes, no electricity for most of the time, diet very bare and simple. Amusements there were. The schoolboys and the university students. There were ways to spend the evenings. But at night, it was a lonely place. And these men and women would not have come to Shantiniketan if Rabindranath had not been there. Visva would not have been possible. I will try shortly to finish this by reading out something which is not in your text. It will probably take 10 minutes. Are you up to it? I mean, not talking, but reciting. Now, in globalization, how is one to measure the passage of time? Generation and paradigm are useful concepts. Together, they make better sense. Generation gap throws up contemporary questions and comes up with contradictory answers. But within known parameters, paradigm shift makes the questions immaterial and opposed answers irrelevant. The Rabindranath Mahatma Gandhi pair was a generation who wished to make state power irrelevant and was followed by Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose pair, which sought the opposite, a sovereign national state. The sons sought state power to transform the village communities of the fathers into an industrial power. Now I will give you one example of a paradigm, two examples of a paradigm shift. Generation gap is easily the generation gap between RT MKG pair and the JN SCB pair. These are fathers and sons. That is a generation gap. The statelessness, neo-anarchism versus the industrial national state. Now, this is what we call Dui Purush. Paradigm shift involves a much longer series of generations. We Brahmin satirists have to recall Choddo Purush, which is probably 20 years a generation or 25 if you like. That makes 150 years. I will take Dwarkanath, Devendranath, Satyendranath, Surendranath, Subirendranath, no, Surendranath, Subirendranath. Dwarkanath, who was an energetic man, would hardly have understood his feckless great-grandson, Subirendranath, who did the cremation of Rabindranath. The world had become unfamiliar. The concerns were different. Now let me take a historical example. The sepoys at the Meerut cantonment in 1857, they, as contrasted with the INA soldiers, Indian National Army soldiers, putting up a pillar in memory, a pillar at Bahadur Shah Zafar's tomb. Now these INA soldiers would not have known much about the sepoys of 1857, though they were honoring the head, Bahadur Shah Zafar. They would find it difficult to understand that the sepoys were fighting a war as the Hindus and Muslims of Hindustan, fighting for the two religions together under the leadership of Bahadur Shah Zafar as a reigning Indian crusade jihad. Take another example, the succeeding example. The soldiers of the INA were put on trial, one Muslim, one Sikh, and one Hindu, in 1945. They would not have understood the Karsevaks at Ayodhya, 1992-2014, with their cry, Musalmanon ka dosthan, Pakistan or Kabristan. And were the sepoys of 1857 to meet the Karsevaks of 2014, they would be, one another would be outlanders, aliens to each other. Now these are examples of a paradigm shift. The story of mankind, however, it takes place at incalculable intervals of time. Three movements can be anthropologically distinguished and go beyond the paradigm shift. A. Homo sapiens breaks out of Africa and replaces other hominids in Afro-Eurasia, and by some mysterious means reach Australasia. That's one. B. Man crosses the frozen Bering Straits into the Americas, traverses the immense distance to Cape Horn, slowly in an altogether different time frame from the cut-off Eastern Hemisphere. That's two. And number three, C. The voyages of Columbus and Magellan interlock the fate of the two hemispheres. It replaces hemispheric time with global time. What is the relevance of all this to Rabindranath? Think. Without one geohistorical world, Rabindranath would not have set out to see the Incas and Aztec ruins and W.H. Hudson's green mansions, the Amazon forest. And he would not have landed up instead to meet Victoria Ocampo, who was the mainstay of his later life and art. I mean, all these three movements are relevant to all of us individually. And these are not paradigms. The conclusion, to distinguish the real from the unreal, Leonard Elmhurst. The story of mankind may be required to take into account another dimension of reality, when the moment transcends generation, paradigm, and indeed temporality, time. Such a moment was the Buddha's realization at Bodh Gaya under the Bodhi tree. In Rabindranath's case, it was the vision at Shahzadpur in 1891. Standing beside his life deity, Jivan Devata, and seeing the world through her eyes. Jivan Devata is mostly a woman, not a man. Seeing the world through her eyes, Rabindranath caught in a fleeting moment a vision in which the past, present, and future fused into one intuitive reality, a dimension in which all is known. As the Gita put it, Vedaham Samatisan Vartamanani cha Arjuna Bhavishyani cha Bhutani. I know all the things that passed before, I know all the things at present, and I know all the things that will come. That is a moment. Recall moments such as this. Socrates is drinking hemlock in a fight for the sake of truth. The Buddha's exposition of the truth at Sarnath, Christ's Sermon on the Mount, Gandhi's martyrdom with Hey Ram on his lips. The story of mankind would be surely incomplete without these moments. Rabindranath's point is that at such moments, the individual mind may be in fleeting touch with what he called the universal mind.